Greetings, Nimrods. So we just done that polywad spreader wad video the other day, and the reason I make the spreader wads is for this shotgun here, and I thought I would tell you about it a little bit. So this gun is a little bit of a well, it's a family heirloom. My father was given this by his stepfather in the early 50s. I believe it's a 1951 Remington Wingmaster, 870 Wingmaster. I think they came out with them in 1950, so this was a fairly new gun at the time. And the reason, well, I don't know if it's the reason why, but the circumstances that brought this gun to my father was that his father had died. My father was about 9 or 10 years old at the time, and my grandmother remarried a gentleman who was really into duck hunting and sporting in general. And so I don't know if it was before they were officially married or the year after, but my grandfather had bought my father and one of his stepbrothers, one of my grandfather's 2 sons that he brought to the family, because they were roughly the same age, one of these each. So my uncle Barry and my father both got an identical gun, and it's choked full because they were duck hunters, and that's why I make those polywad spreader wads. I haven't reamed this out. I don't know if I will someday or not. I don't use it a ton, but I do use it, and I shoot it well. It's a good little gun, nice light barrel. I think the 20 gauges now have the, obviously they have the rib on the barrel, but it's a lightweight barrel for a 20 gauge gun. So one of the unfortunate things was that this gun was neglected. When I was a kid, I remember seeing this gun and never seeing it be shot because this thing was rusted pretty bad. And as long as I had been around, this gun had been broken and not used. So I didn't really know the history of it, and I didn't know that my grandfather had bought it for my father. And once I knew that and I saw the gun, I asked my dad if I could have it because I was getting into hunting at the time. This would have been, I was in my mid-30s when that happened, and he said, sure, it doesn't work. And I had it fixed. Nowadays I probably would have fixed it myself. I know a little bit more about guns, and I'm willing to dig into stuff like that, but at that time I knew nothing. And so I had a gunsmith fix it, and it was rusted to snot. I mean, I sanded it up and everything. I took all the heavy rust and pitting off of it and handed it off to him to repair it and check it to make sure it was safe to shoot. And so 2 things you'll notice about it, a Remington 870 Wingmaster usually has a very shiny blue barrel, and this does not have a shiny blue barrel. It has a matte grayish barrel. So when he reblued this thing was pitted so badly that it was going to look terrible if you did shiny bluing on it. I don't know if we can see that, but it was pitted really badly. And so his thought was, well, let's bead blast it and then blue it, and it'll have a nice flat finish, and it does. I think that was the right thing to do. The other thing I noticed about the finish, or the way this looks, is that the stock is a very flat finish, an oil finish. That's not the shiny glossy finish that 870 Wingmasters are known for. And that had more to do with my father and my grandfather being duck hunters. They didn't like shiny finishes on their guns. Perhaps that's why it was rusted. I don't know. I don't know if they dipped them in salt water before they went hunting, but he did have my father immediately scrape all the shiny finish off the stock and refinish it with an oil finish when he got it, before he even used it. So there you go. It's a fun gun to shoot, and it's got some significant family heritage there. Some, this is one of the things that's nice about guns, is that you can have something your grandfather gave your father, and I will give my son, one of my sons, and hopefully they give it to their son. And the gun will last a long time. This gun is 70 years old or whatever. It's in, it could be 200 years old and it would be fine. So, it's a great thing about, living in this country and being able to have guns. It's, some of them are special and they can last a long time and don't take a lot of maintenance. People who, more and more nowadays, people are not raised with any gun culture, and they may not understand that. I mean, if you can imagine your parents had a car that they loved and you loved, it's not going to be practical for them to give you that car, or a home, or there's lots of things that we have attachment to that we cannot save for generations. It's just not practical, and guns are. That's not the case. You can hand these down, a little bit of oil, and you're in a good shape. So it's a great thing. This gun will never be sold. Hopefully we never lose it or have it stolen. So it still functions fine. I do use very light loads in it. I did try to use some hunting loads in it. Some of my homemade, I shouldn't say that, my reloads I use for grouse hunting. I tried to use this as a backup grouse gun, which was stupid because it's full choked. And I didn't realize that at the time. I don't know how I could not realize that, but I didn't. Took it grouse hunting. First grouse I shot at, I could not extract the shells, so I was locked up, and it is because of all the pitting. Probably, there was some pitting in the chamber as well, and when it was refinished, that it looks fine when you look at it, but the reality is that it's probably, on a microscopic level, it's probably a pretty coarse finish in there, and when you have a high brass shell expand inside there, it's not coming out. I mean, I basically had to walk home and find a rod and pop the shell out, and it was terrible too, because it was one of those times where one grouse went up and I shot, and then I'm trying to get my gun to cycle, and I don't know, it seemed like an awful lot of grouse went up at that point. And so I didn't hunt grouse with it ever again after that. I have shot woodcock with it, and I use it for pheasant hunting. Don't ask me how I shot a woodcock with a full choke gun. And I must have just nicked it because it wasn't bad. But this is sort of my pheasant hunting gun, and we don't really have real pheasant hunting down here. The state will stock areas with them, and we'll stock on a Friday night, and Saturday morning a bunch of sportsmen will run down to where they stock the pheasant, and they're sitting there waiting for the truck to come back and pick them up, and they flush them up and shoot at them, and we don't get involved in that. We come back a day after, and the dog and I will find them deep in the woods where they're sitting around, wonder where the hell they are and when the feed truck's coming. But I digress. So it's not very challenging pheasant hunting, let's put it that way. But that's what I use this gun for, is the pheasant hunting. The dog doesn't know the difference. And yeah, full choke. I've definitely made some pheasant soup, let's put it that way. But yeah, it's one of my favorite guns for that, for being my father's gun that was given to him by his grandfather. I have a gun that's my father's gun that's my least favorite gun, and maybe I'll share that with you another day. Another note on my grandfather, like I said before, he was an avid duck hunter. He had some notoriety in the area he grew up in, yeah, and where my father grew up. And I'll post a video at the end of this video that actually shows my grandfather. It's kind of neat to see your grandfather on YouTube. He had made some home movies about the time he gave this gun to my father. My father is not in the movies. My two uncles are, and they were about the age my father was. So it was right about that time where my grandfather was courting my grandmother. And I call him my grandfather even though he's my step-grandfather, but he's the only grandfather on that side of the family I ever knew. He's my grandfather. And yeah, sorry for rambling. Check out that link. Happy hunting, Nimrods.